Have you already binge watched everything you can find and have run out of things to watch? Are you desperate to find a self-produced show by two old guys that have no experience or discernible talent? Have you been searching for new entertainment in a cutting-edge genre that combines bourbon and a television show that ended over 6 years ago? Well, if you have, my friend, you have struck pay dirt. And honestly, Ken, I can't understand why we aren't facing more competition in this red-hot genre. I want to welcome you into the Liquid Courage Show and introduce you to the other half of the Bourbon Brother team. He is my brother from another mother and my co-pilot on this crazy adventure we call a show. Ken, how are you doing on this fine evening?
I am doing as well as one can be doing in this Tom Jones era. It's just getting worse and worse. I see California is deep into it, and as well as out here in PA. So I'm really looking forward to tonight's show.
Yeah, we not only have Tom Jones, What's New Pussycat, playing 20 times in a row everywhere. It is loud and on repeat.
Very obnoxious. And it's not letting up. So turn up that jukebox.
It's going to make for an interesting holiday.
Indeed.
Well, I know I sound like a broken record, because I'm pretty sure I say this every show, but man, I've been looking forward to this all week. Let's jump in. If you're new to the show, the format is simple. First, we kick things off with a tasting and discussion of the spirit. It's usually a bourbon, and we'll continue to enjoy that spirit throughout the remainder of the show. Sometimes things go off the rails. And as for the remainder of the show, we're going to focus on one specific episode of a favorite television series where we start with the pilot and we work our way through episode by episode to the series finale. Tonight, we are going to be discussing season 1, episode 9 of Kurt Sutter's Sons of Anarchy, and the episode is titled Hell Followed. For those of you that are watching the show on YouTube, I want to let you know that we do publish the show in 3 parts. You are currently watching part 1, so you're in the right place. And this will cover the bourbon tasting, and then parts 2 and 3 will be the discussion of the episode. So please be sure to like and subscribe, and click that little bell in the upper right-hand corner so you don't miss a single show. Also, if you don't want to look at our ugly mugs, or you prefer to listen in the car or at the office, someday when we can go back to the office, you can also subscribe to the podcast version of the show. And it is available on iTunes and Stitcher and iHeartRadio and just about anywhere you can find your local favorite podcast. We also want to hear from you. Send us your praise, your questions, your hate comms. We'll take anything and everything. Let us know how we're doing, what you like, what you dislike, and what you'd like to see more of. We are trying to make the show better, so your feedback is appreciated and helpful. You can leave your comments in the comments section of this video, or you can email your questions to us at ask@bourbonbros, that's BROS.TV. And if your question doesn't suck, we might even answer it on a future show. And with that out of the way, Ken, let's kick this sucker off. You know what I'm going to ask.
Yep.
What are we drinking tonight?
Well, this is important, especially tonight, John, and I am really looking forward to this because I have not had the chance to partake of this yet. This is an unopened bottle of Four Roses.
Very nice. And I believe this is the small batch variety, correct?
It is. It is.
So I have not had this either, and nice to see that we're opening a freshie. We'll see how hard it is for you to get through all of that safety seal wrapping. And I believe this one's right around that $37, $40 range. So, a mid-priced, kind of widely available bourbon. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Like you, I've not had it before. And I thought a little bit about why, because Four Roses is fairly well known and fairly respected. It's one of the reasons we chose it for the show. And if I'm honest with myself, I think I probably had a block on it because it feels like the name Four Roses feels a little too commercialized to me, and maybe a little soft, like a wine, a fine wine. And I kind of like that names like Booker's, where it feels like my great grandfather was making it in the hills of Kentucky. And I think I just kind of naturally gravitate towards those types of names, and had a block on it. What about you? Why have you steered clear of it until now?
I don't know, because looking at the bottle, it's a cool looking bottle. I like that raised roses here in the center.
Yeah.
It's well put together. I like the bottle. I don't
And you're
know
a
why
bottle guy, so that
I'm a
is
bottle
important
guy.
to you.
It's very important. I don't know why I passed it up.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I don't have an explanation.
While you struggle with getting that bottle open, I'll go through some of the basic details, as I always do. The bourbon we'll be enjoying tonight is a 90 proof bourbon. It's out of Four Roses Distillery. Kieran Brewing Company, actually, Kieran Beer. Kieran owns Four Roses.
Really? Okay.
There's no age statement. And the mash bill is 75% corn, which I know you like, 20% rye, 5% malted barley, or it could be a 60% corn, little lower corn, 35% rye, and 5% malted barley. So potentially more corn or more rye. And I always like, before we pour a glass and taste it, to just give the quick summary, because I like to compare what our impressions are to how Four Roses describes it. So this is their summary. If you've ever wanted proof that mingling bourbons is an art unto itself, you'll find it in this perfectly balanced small batch bourbon. Four original bourbon recipes have been expertly selected by our master distiller at the peak of maturation to create this very mellow and perfectly balanced bourbon. You can enjoy it best straight up on the rocks or simply with a splash of your favorite mixer. So in a very flowery way, they've basically said that this is a blend.
Yeah.
That's what we're drinking.
I take out of that. Okay.
So with that in mind, do you have it poured?
I do. I got past the safety seal and I'm ready to go.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's raise a glass.
Cheers.
Cheers.
That's good.
It is good. I'm actually trying to think of what it most reminds me of. And it's a little, I can't necessarily peg it in any one category. This sounds odd considering we just referred to it as a blend, but it tastes like it covers a lot of different areas. There's a little bit of sweetness, but there's also a little bit of that spice.
Mm-hmm. The burn is good. It's consistent. It's not as oaky as some we've had. I think the wood for reserve, as comparison, is deeper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely picking up a little bit more of the spice from the rye than some of the other ones we've had that have definitely been more on a higher corn mash bill.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very nice.
Yeah, I like it. I can't believe I passed it up all these years.
So there's some interesting history with Four Roses, because for about 40 years, you couldn't get Four Roses in the United States.
Really?
Which, considering that it's made in Kentucky, that would seem odd. Four Roses bourbon was purchased in the late 1940s by Seagram's. And in the U.S., they replaced the bourbon with relatively cheap, or I should say inexpensive, Canadian whiskey, blended whiskey, under the Four Roses label. It was not bourbon. It was a blended Canadian whiskey. And the reason for that is Seagram's had a very large interest in blended whiskey. And so they really wanted to push that and therefore kind of moved Four Roses into this blended whiskey category. It's kind of a whiskey flavored vodka. And they then took the actual bourbon that Four Roses produced, and that was sold in Europe and Asia, where it became one of the top selling American whiskeys.
Okay.
And then Four Roses bourbon was not reintroduced to the U.S. market until February of 2002.
Whoa.
So
That's a
it's
long hiatus.
only been available back in the U.S. during the last 18 years.
Wow.
And that was shortly after Kirin purchased the brand, the trademark, and their production facilities. So it's amazing to think that from like the late 40s to 2002, you could not get Four Roses bourbon here in the U.S.
That's wild.
Now, having this and then, making the choice to finally get through whatever mental block I had on Four Roses and doing it for the show tonight and then researching it for the show tonight, it really makes me want to get into some of their more kind of special limited release bourbons, because the things that I've learned and the way that they make bourbon, it's very intriguing, and it makes me think that some of their smaller special releases could be really good. For example, one of the things that Four Roses does that's different from a lot of distilleries is they attempt to minimize the temperature differences between barrels. Most distilleries will have a multi-story warehouse. And as we know from K-12 science, right? Cold air is heavier, hot air rises, right? So if you have a multi-story warehouse, it's going to be warmer in those top floors than it will the lower floors. Because of that, Four Roses tries to minimize that temperature difference by only using single-story warehouses and aging all of their barrels at floor level.
Wow.
So your multi-story traditional warehouses can have a 35-degree swing, and that's common in temperature. And Four Roses has on average an 8-degree swing, and that is all.
So they're really going out of their way to control the environmentals, is what you're saying.
Yes. And the fact that they're putting that amount of effort into wanting to create consistency, again, it makes me want to try some of their special releases. And, what we're drinking tonight is, I guess, more of the mass-produced blended bourbon, but there are, they have single barrels and some rare releases that would be interesting just based on the care they give.
Right. No, I'd be open to trying those as well. When you were describing the mash bill, you mentioned there was two mash bills that could be used for the same
Yes.
recipe there. Can you explain that a little more?
So I'm glad you brought it up, because when I read about it, I had not seen that before. And so as far as I know, this is not common. And I don't know if they're the only ones doing it, but I believe it's certainly in the minority. But they will combine 2 mash bills with 5 different proprietary yeast strains to end up with a total of 10 distinct bourbon recipes.
Okay.
Right. So it's basically 5 different yeasts, each of those 5 with one of 2 recipes for a total of 10.
I see.
Each recipe brings a little something different to the batch, and so they then take those and carefully mingle them, blend them to achieve all kinds of different flavor profiles. And this is, again, one of the reasons I'm kind of excited to get into some of their other bourbons and why it absolutely has to be a mandatory stop when we do the Bourbon Trail. They can take recipes that have more of a sweet complex and blend it with one that has more of a spicy complex, one that has more fruit or floral. And so they create these very distinct flavor profiles, and then they can mix them to kind of create whatever bourbon they want. The other thing that's interesting is because they've got these 10 recipes, each recipe ends up with a code that is similar to like a VIN on a car that tells you the exact mash bill and yeast strain that was used.
Now, is that here on the bottle somewhere?
No, because we're drinking the small batch, which is kind of their mass produced. It's not on the bottle, but it is essentially the same recipe. So I can give you that code, and I will. In this bourbon, the small batch, they're taking 4 of the 10 recipes, and it's always the same 4, and they blend those 4 together.
And they're the same blend every time.
Correct. So it uses, in this case, the 4 recipes. The codes are OBSK, OESK, OBSO, and OESO.
All right.
So if you look at the code, the first letter, the O, designates the production facility. So in this case, they all use the letter O, which designates Four Roses Distillery. So if they ever expanded and added a second distillery, that would be a different letter. So as long as you see the O, you know it's the Four Roses Distillery in Kentucky. The second letter designates the mash bill, which can be either E, which is the higher corn, 75% corn, 20% rye, 5% malted barley, or the B, B as in boy, which is 60% corn and 35% rye, with 5% malted barley. And then the third letter is always S and designates the whiskey distillation, which in this case is a straight whiskey. So the S represents a straight whiskey.
Right.
And then the fourth letter designates the yeast strain, which can be a V as in Victor, which is delicate fruit, K as in Ken, which would be slight spice, O, which would be rich fruit, or Q, floral essence, or F, herbal notes. So those are the 5 different yeast strains. So going back to this one, 4 different recipes that have been combined. OBSK means mash bill B using the slight spice yeast strain. You then have OBSO, which is mash bill B and the rich fruit yeast strain. Then OESK, which is going to be mash bill E and the slight spice. And then OESO is the mash bill E with the rich fruit. So if you break all that down, what it basically means is you're getting the high corn mash bill with the slight spice and the high corn mash bill with the rich fruit. And then you're going to get the higher rye mash bill with the slight spice and the rich fruit. And so what you end up with is, and I don't know what the percentages would be, but if we assume that they're all blended equally, then you're basically getting 50% of the higher corn, 50% of the higher rye, and a combination of a slight spice and a rich fruit yeast strain to make up this small batch.
Interesting. Well, you did a lot of homework here, John. Great work.
Yeah, I just found it fascinating that was how they approach it. You tend to find that there's just one single recipe for a single type of bourbon. And it's interesting here that they're making 10 distinct recipes and then blending those together. I had not seen or heard about that before. I know it's common in wines, right, where you can have a single grape, like a Cabernet, or there can be a red blend where they're blending multiple grapes together. So I know that happens fairly commonly in the wine category. I had not encountered it on the bourbon category. All right. So before we wrap up, let's enjoy a little more Four Roses, and let's hit the mailbag for a couple questions that didn't suck.
Okay. Sounds good.
So one of the questions that we got, Ken, was from Julie K. And I love this question. She says, I've watched some of the show on YouTube. Thank you for watching, Julie. But I'd like to listen to the podcast in my car while I'm driving. Where can I find the podcast? So yes, we do publish the show in a video format on YouTube. We also have the audio version as a podcast. It's really simple. If you just simply go into the description of any one of our videos, you'll find a URL that is basically bourbonbros.tv/links, LINKS, and simply click on that link and it will give you a list of everywhere that you can find the show. So you'll see access to YouTube, you'll see the links for the podcast. It's all right there. So bourbonbros.tv/links will get you where you want to go. And again, if you're listening to the podcast and you want to find it on YouTube, same thing. Go to bourbonbros.tv/links and you'll be able to find a link right to the YouTube channel. And Ken, I'm going to let you answer this one. Brent F. asked us, can we suggest bourbons for you to review on the show?
And the answer is absolutely. In fact, if you're open to it, you can just send us some bottles, and that'll be a lot more cost effective for us. And we'll review anything.
Our wallet would appreciate you. Now, keep in mind, you have to send two, because one has to go to Ken in Pennsylvania and one has to come to me in California.
Right.
But you're welcome to send us 2 bottles, and we'll be happy to review it on the show.
Yep. More than happy to. Thanks, Brent.
And I will say, like, yes, please suggest bourbons that you'd like for us to try, because we'd love to do it and share our thoughts with you. Just keep in mind that we have to be able to find them. You know, don't send us requests to review Pappy Van Winkle. The chances of Ken finding it in Pennsylvania and me finding it here in California, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, because not only do we have to find it, we have to be able to afford it. And True. So that's the other thing. If we're going to do a new bourbon every single week, they can't be $300 or $400 bottles. That's why we're doing the small batch 4 roses and not a single barrel. If more of you watch and listen and this thing takes off, then we may eventually be able to do some of those more expensive bourbons. But for now, you can either send us expensive bourbon or expect to find bourbon that we all can afford. Fair enough?
Well put.
All right. So that's going to do it for part 1. Next, we're going to get into our discussion of Sons of Anarchy, Season 1, Episode 9, titled Hell Followed. I once again just want to give everybody a quick reminder. Please like and subscribe. Please check out our channel for more shows. But as always, the most important thing is to top off your glass and join us for part 2, because it's all coming up next on the Liquid Courage Show. Stay with us.